This is Michael Woodward, and this is Season 2, Episode 103 of the Jumblethink Podcast.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Jumblethink Podcast, where we interview amazing entrepreneurs that turn their dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we'll share tips on how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. Our guest on today's episode is Jane Deuber. More about Jane in a moment. If you're new to the Jumblethink Podcast or you've been listening to it for a long time, make sure you subscribe on your favorite place to listen to podcasts. If you like listening on iTunes, simply go to jumblethink.com/iTunes, and for Spotify, jumblethink.com/Spotify will take you right to the app, right to where you can subscribe. Now let's jump into today's episode. Welcome to the Jumblethink Podcast. My name is Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have a very, very fun episode lined up for you today. Before we get rolling, we always like to take a moment and thank those people sponsoring the podcast. Our friends over at Floxy, they're helping you with on-demand graphic design service on a monthly subscription. Super cool service. You'll learn a little bit more about that in a minute. Today's episode is also sponsored by our friends over at mightytravels.com/jumblethink. They will help you get the best rate for your next flight. We'll share a little bit more about how they can help you a little bit later in the episode, and also our friends over at opportunityinchina.com. Whether you want to teach in Asia or whether you want to learn in Asia, they will help you find the right spot for you. You can learn more about them at opportunityinchina.com. Now let's join the conversation we had with today's guest, Jane Deuber. Here's a little bit more about Jane. We are live today with Jane Deuber, and she is the founder of Global Experts Accelerator, doing really, really cool things. Jane, thanks so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, Michael. We're going to have some fun.
Yes. We were just talking before we jumped on, and you had sent over a link that we didn't have up till yesterday, and it had some really cool things in there that caught my attention and went, whoa, all right, that's something we have to talk about. So the first thing is that you have a diverse background in learning. And
I'm obsessed with it, actually.
Well, that's a great thing to be. I mean, some of the best traits, well, not best, but some of the most marked traits of a lot of successful entrepreneurs is their constant consumption of education, whether it's traditional methods through institutions or whether it's learning on their own through books that they read or whatever that is that they like to consume. And so for you, have you always been just fascinated with learning and understanding things?
Yeah, I think here's what I'll say. Yes, and there was like this time period, my younger years, I got to be honest, was like completely, I don't know, I must have been having an out-of-body experience when I was younger, or else my family says it was some sort of, the invasion of the body snatchers at around high school. But like I spent my younger years watching Gilligan's Island and eating Captain Crunch and sitting in front of the TV. So like not the early years, but something kicked in, Michael. I don't know what it was. I think it was my first taste of it, going for a goal and achieving it in high school. But like, I think that's where I really kind of got, wow, like you can pretty much transform who you are by setting a goal and going for it and working towards it. So yeah, I think, since that stage, I was always hungry to learn. I wasn't always learning anything that was applicable. Like, so I went through that period of time where my father was scratching his head wondering why, he had paid for my education, but I finally found it. Like I got my groove, I got on track, I found out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so that's when it really kicked in and the learning started to sort of gel and mold for me and help me understand like what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that the things you were learning weren't necessarily things that had a continuous line of rational, like, hey, I want to learn this, so it applies to my business. I'm going to go learn that so I can make my business better. But what's interesting is recently there was a study released that said top achievers typically have a vast knowledge of information that they can pull from to make better decisions on hyper-focused and usually areas. And usually they aren't areas that are actually connected. Steve Jobs is a great example where the thing that he remembers most from any kind of college was calligraphy and how he's applied that when he built Apple into beautiful design and usability and understanding how form and function go together. So the fact that you studied East Asian studies and learned Mandarin Chinese and all of these things might seem irrational, but I think that there's a continuity of just being able to apply knowledge. So for you, as you've started your entrepreneurial journey back in the late 80s, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But for you, and I want to say one other thing here. Gilligan's Island may be, you mentioned that, one of the best TV shows from like that era about innovation and creation and making things, if you really think about it.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought about it.
And so anyway, side note. For you, when was that moment where you went, you know what? I don't think I'll be satisfied with going the traditional path of what I've been told I should do. Go get the job, have the family, get the house, do all of that. But you said, hey, maybe there's a different path for me. When did that start for you?
It's a great question. So, Michael, I would say, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. So, my dad, when he met my mom way before I was born, they were dirt poor, and he used to go out and shoot squirrel and rabbit to eat. I mean, they really, really were struggling in the beginning. And I just, by the time I came along, he had, we went into sales, from the steel mill to sales, from sales to owning his own distributorship. So I was born in a family where you figure it out, right? And so I got to watch him do that. And I watched him, I was kind of there in the later years of him building a business. So he had already had this success, but I saw him continue to have innovative ideas and go for it. Like I saw him start businesses that didn't work, and I saw him start businesses that just rocked it. And so I think, in our household, risk was rewarded, from just watching him do that to like how we would play in the snow in the wintertime in Ohio. The ones who were going the fastest down the hill on the sled got the goodies, right? So risk was rewarded. And so I think, I don't know if I ever consciously said, okay, I'm going to do a different path, because I think my path was always going to be entrepreneurship. I never imagined working for myself. So even when I went to get my master's in international business, I picked a school that was really based around entrepreneurship. So I went and got my master's degree with no intention whatsoever to be employed. I just knew I was going to make it on my own, and started a business with $5,000 after that. So it's been in my DNA since I was born, I think.
Well, okay. You just said something that you glossed way too quickly over. You started your first business with $5,000, but there is much more to that story. That was supposed to be your wedding money, right?
Yeah. So here's what's crazy. So I lived in Vienna first, right? I would say you mentioned something, and I never made the connection, Michael. Thank you for this. But I went to Vienna because I wanted to travel throughout Europe. So I did my junior year abroad. And I'll tell you, like, I went and I studied opera.
Oh,
right?
Wow. Okay.
Which is crazy,
Yeah.
right? I didn't really like opera, but I think that probably layered some of the, the different ways I saw the world. Probably, it's so interesting that you mentioned that. So that was junior year. And then in between my first and second year of master's, I went over and lived in Vienna. I'd also studied in Japan. So all of these different multicultural, there you go, experiences, I think kind of led me to seeing the world through different eyes. So when I went, I went to graduate school. I was actually going to go back to Taiwan and live. I wanted to go to mainland China, actually.
Okay.
But how life always throws those ball curves.
Yeah.
So I met my now husband of 31 years, but I met him when I was doing my thesis, and this man's from Ecuador. Right? Completely out of my realm, never studied Spanish. I met him, and I fell head over heels in love. And so rather than going to, mainland China to start a trade company, which I thought I was going to do, rather than getting an engagement ring, I didn't really get a ring until like a good ring, as I would say, about 10 years in. We took the $5,000 and we started a business together.
Wow.
And he was a waiter in a restaurant, and I came out with a master's degree. And where we melded is we knew we had this like burning desire to have a vision, to have a business that would impact a lot of lives. So we formed a bond, both as, husband and wife, but as business partners. And that, I think, that talk about burning bridges, there was no turning back.
Yeah.
And that's how it all started, really.
Wow. Okay, so I want to go a little bit deeper into that from a strange angle, but you mentioned you've been married for over, I think it's 31 years now, and you've been in a partnership of not only just marriage and family and all of that and what that entails, but also in entrepreneurship. And so many entrepreneurs, there's different streams. Of course, there's the, hey, this is my spouse, they have their job, and I'm an entrepreneur, and that whole thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of times when you have partnerships in business, there's a lot of complexity to that. I can't imagine what the complexity is of balancing family and entrepreneurship when your business partner is also your spouse. Talk to us a little bit about navigating family and entrepreneur life as a family.
Yeah. So, first of all, you got to be really in love. You have to be, you've got to really, accept that person for who they are. All of the same traits of a good marriage, not trying to change the other person and really honoring and respecting who they are. But I think in the business side of it, for us, early on, we were really, really on the same page in terms of values and what business meant to us and what compromises we would and wouldn't make. And so that helped us in decision making. But I think, Michael, because I'm interviewed on this a lot, and for us, it was just really clearly defining our boundaries and who did what in the business. And we really didn't have any responsibilities that overlapped. We each let the other person do the thing that they do. Now, I will tell you, like, thankfully, it wasn't in the beginning, but later on, the first business, he was more in the ops. He oversaw the division, the shipping division and finances, but then he really took on to technology. So he's always been in the tech space because we have 3 companies, 2 of them are technology companies. And so he and his team that has been with us for 11 years, they really are, in a sense, in some ways, our vendor in terms of technology. And then I run the operations, servicing clients and marketing. And so we kind of come together from that, okay, we're a common goal, but we each have our own area. And the other thing is we don't really talk about business after 5. Never.
Okay.
Never.
Yeah.
Like no bed, no pillow talk whatsoever around business. And that was a boundary. Of course, first business, we didn't have that. The first 13 years, we didn't have that. And I can tell you, we sold the business and kept the marriage because we were having difficulty with that first business because we didn't set those boundaries.
Wow. And I love that. There are healthy boundaries and then there are unhealthy boundaries, but finding that and evolving that, you mentioned the first 13 years you didn't have that and then you built it in. For you, the process of learning, as we already discussed, is significant. How can you learn from experience as an entrepreneur? How can you have that awareness when it's so easy to get trapped into daily operations, things you have to do, all the tasks, that you can have the awareness to say, hey, this is working, this isn't working. How can you build that habit in to be able to see what most entrepreneurs don't want to see?
Yeah. The gut response is that business awareness can't even happen unless there's not self-awareness, and I can't remember which book it is. It might've been Principles by Dalio, but it's the CEO's job is the most important part of his job or her job is to think, right? To think. And I think when I look at, when I'm working with private clients or, in our masterminds, when I look to see what I see people doing is they're just running so quickly and they're just, making decisions, knee-jerk decisions because they feel like they're in a hurry. And I will tell you that if you don't have some sort of ritual that carves out morning time every single day, at the very least every weekday, where you start the morning really being thoughtful and conscious about where you are. I do a lot of journaling. I've got that down to a science. I can find answers that I couldn't, pay $100,000 to get. I can
Wow.
find it through journaling. But so I can say that, it's just really giving yourself the space and time to be thoughtful, to be self-aware, and to sometimes just slow it down.
Mm.
People are in such a hurry, Michael. Yeah.
Well, and I love that you're saying about self-awareness. Business awareness can't happen without self-awareness. I think that's a postable quote from you today. That I think that's going to be it. You are a person that tends to, at least from appearances, be more analytical in your thought processes. And so many people who are conceptual about, like, I have this idea, I have this dream, they are, I hate to say it this way, but there's a lot of mysticism almost around it. Like it's just magic what they do. And on the flip side, they can't see the nitty gritty. They can't see the systems and all of that. And so there's that partnership usually between the visionary and the operations manager. How can people who struggle with that, the self-awareness and the business awareness, and with putting healthy systems in place, how can they start to be like more aware of what's going on so that they can make those decisions?
Yeah, great question. I will tell you, so it's interesting because I have been kind of playing with this, and I'm getting ready to write the next book, and so that's one of the things that's on the docket for this year for
I'm going
us.
to pause you there for a second. We didn't
Yes.
mention this yet. You authored 2 best-selling books that have been translated into at least 6 languages. So that should be notated. It's not like, hey, I'm just writing another book. You write really killer books with really good content. So anyway, sorry.
And it was such a great experience because the first time Simon & Schuster came to us, the organization that I had at the time, to write the book, and so I didn't really know what I was doing. That's a whole nother story. But I will say, so for me, I talk about something called the Entrepreneurial Continuum.
Okay.
And it's really understanding where you naturally sit on this continuum. And on the far, if you could see my hands, on the far left is what I would call the right brain creative, right? And that's the part that can tap into that intuitive, creative side, thinks outside the box. Typically on that side, there's a bit of beer in there. They like to be in nature. They're not real hard driving, don't like planning. And on the other side is the doer, or the left brain creative, logical, linear brain.
Okay.
And so my experience is the more I was able to find that central place where I could dance between right brain creative and logical linear, the more I was able to really, we play a game around here. We've started 7 businesses, and the game was how quickly can we get to the million mark? That's the game we play. And so I just found that the better I was at balancing that, because we can't be, some people tend to be on the left brain linear or logical, but then they miss all these opportunities. They may not be as good at creating those relationships. And some people err on the side of being right brain creative and they can't get anything done, right? So, so what I love is to really support entrepreneurs and really honoring where they naturally tend to, and finding ways to bring out that other side in them. So the more that they can balance in the middle, I've just seen it happen time and time again in helping people grow their business, the more they just kick ass and make it happen.
All right. I want to pivot here a little bit. This has been such a fun conversation around these topics, and any of these we could go like a billion steps deeper, and maybe we should sometime. That would be a lot of fun.
I love it. Yeah, let's do it again.
We talked about educational perspective and that thirst for learning. But part of your story is that you have a desire or hunger for travel and experience.
Mm-hmm.
That perspective of experience, it's so easy to get locked in as a business owner in a Western philosophy of doing business and how we process what we do and why we do it. For you, how has travel impacted your perspective on starting and running businesses?
No one's ever asked me that question. I love it. I would say that just as, business owners, I play in the thought leader world, so we can get clear about, so it's coaches, speakers, trainers, authors, consultants, that's my tribe, and that's who we serve. And so for me to be able to really truly serve them, I've got to have empathy. I've got to be able to walk in their shoes. I've got to know what keeps them up at night, right? So that's, as any entrepreneur, you've got to have empathy and have a real true understanding of your client. I think through travel, that's probably where I first learned empathy. It's where I first was able to see something through someone else's eyes. That junior year in Austria, I lived with a hausfrau who was, a single woman in her 70s who was, a victim of World War II. She was a nurse in World War II, and God, she saw the world through completely different eyes. And I mean, I just think that when you immerse yourself in another culture and you truly try and see their world through their eyes, you see things that you would never see from your own perspective. And so I think that's what entrepreneurs need to do in their own world and serving their own tribes. I think that's my first thought is empathy, perspective, being able to see something that you wouldn't otherwise see.
That's so, so cool. As we move towards the end of this first segment, we haven't covered this yet, and it's a very important question because it gives perspective. You just mentioned perspective there. What is it that you do?
I ask myself that. So I would say the common thread. So we have a company, like the umbrella company has 3 divisions underneath it, Michael.
Okay. Yeah.
The first one is the coaching and consulting. That's where I roll up my sleeves. No matter how big we get or no matter where I am in my career, I'm always going to work one-on-one because I think it's the thing that this industry is aching for. So, that first division is me rolling up my sleeves, coaching individually, having retreats, that kind of thing, VIP days. So, and that's the one division. The second division is a company we started about 6 years ago on e-learning. So we work with experts who are ready to leverage. They're at that stage where they're wanting to scale. And so we help them take their expertise that they've been delivering, sometimes for years, sometimes just a year or so. We help them take it online so they can reach a bigger audience. So that's e-learning is the second division. And then the third division, we could talk about a little bit more because it's one of those businesses that like sort of grew itself. It's like demanded to be started.
It just said, hey, look at me. I have something for you.
Well, it was really born out of a problem we were having in our own business, with sales and sales conversion. And I just hated not knowing who was on my list. We had this thousands of people and I didn't know who they were. So we just created a tool for us to understand who they were, what they needed, where they were in the process. And I will say that, in so many ways it humanized our ability to serve our list and really created these deep connections. So we started a business around teaching experts how to use assessments and surveys in their business to really, really increase conversion and engagement, all that yummy stuff. So those are the 3 divisions. The common thread amongst all of them, so that you don't think that I'm absolutely nuts. I mean, it really is around leverage.
Okay.
And it's, we build businesses to eventually sell them. That's what we've done. I've sold 3 of the 7 businesses that we created. And so I know that if you don't have leverage, all you have is, you don't have a business, you have a job. Yeah. So I'm really passionate about helping people make sure that they build leverage into their business so they have that freedom that they're wanting.
So cool. When did this whole concept for you of this specific business start?
The assessment company?
No, just the whole concept of what you're doing. The big picture.
It sort of, it morphed, that first business, we, for 13 years, it was a product-based business. So I built a sales force of over 350 people who were out marketing and selling our product. And I was done. Like, as I said, we sold the business to keep the marriage kind of thing. It went to 2.5 million from 5,000. And I just said, I'm done. I've taken it as far as I can take it. So we sold that business, Michael. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I was hired as a consultant in the industry. And that was my first taste. That first business was a direct selling business. So I was teaching women how to have their own business. I was already teaching entrepreneurship since 1987, really. Wow. But it was the idea of going into another company and really moving the needle with just some simple things that seemed like common sense to me that had worked for us. And so, now we're doing a consulting business in a specific niche of thought leaders. But I think, I love, there's a lot of angst out there. There's a lot of
Yeah.
suffering in the
Yeah.
entrepreneurial space. So like we talk about spiritual mission in my world, like what our spiritual mission, each of us has that. And mine is to inspire possibility and hope and to
Okay.
alleviate suffering through entrepreneurship.
So when you
That's what
say
inspires
spiritual, what was that terminology you used? Spiritual
mission.
mission.
Yeah.
That sounds very faith driven. Are you a faith driven entrepreneur, or is it more of a higher calling kind of thing? Like, what does that mean when you say that?
That's another question I've never been asked. Yeah, so I would consider myself a very faithful person. I have a strong spiritual connection. And when I talked about the journaling,
Yeah.
I have a process where I journal with Source or God or whatever that, whatever name you want to give it. I have a pretty great connection to that. And it's a process I actually learned from a man named Tim Kelly about a decade ago.
Wow.
And it's a journal process. You write it out like a script. And when you can really sink into it, you get answers that you couldn't access otherwise. So yeah, I would say, every morning I'm up and I'm asking, how do I serve today? And if I've got a problem, I take it there and I get pretty profound answers, actually.
Yeah, and I love what you just said there. I'm going to give a little teaser right now. Our next episode, I'm going to be talking about how any dream and idea you have, so often we put that on ourselves, but it's actually about how we can end up serving others.
Yeah.
And I think
absolutely.
we miss that as entrepreneurs and dreamers sometimes, that the dream and idea usually has little to do with us directly. It's usually not as selfish as we actually think it is, and it's more about the world around us.
Yeah, in fact, you have some, the rapid fire questions at the end.
Yeah,
One of
yeah.
them is about that.
Yeah.
My dad, as an entrepreneur, I had a great role model in that, the money piece was sort of I guess, how he played at it. He got to the place where, that was sort of the scorecard, and that's why he would take risks. But in the end, your bottom line of your business is a representation of how deeply and well and meaningful you're serving clients.
Yeah.
And, what I would say, what's interesting is I said bottom line, not top line, because a lot of people focus on revenues. And I'm really big. It doesn't, I've had people say I want to hit the million mark, and they're talking about the top line.
Yeah.
And Michael, I said, so what profit margin do you want to hit this year? And she said, I don't care. I just want to hit the million mark.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, when I say that the bottom line is the scorecard, because you need to be financially responsible to yourself and to your team and to your family. So it's not just how much revenues you're bringing in. It's like how wisely are you building the business? And that's how we can really serve, because we got to stay in business in order to serve the client. That's
so good. And I think this is a great time to ask this question. How are you finding purpose in what you do?
Gosh, it goes back to that spiritual mission,
Okay.
So we have a business mission that's very much around the tools, how we're empowering our clients to create leveraged businesses. But my spiritual mission is to inspire hope and possibility and to alleviate suffering. So how I find purpose is if a blog that I write, helps people see that I'm going through the same thing and offers a solution. If, we really do a lot of interaction with the people on our list outside of any kind of campaign. And we do assessments. So I talked about assessments earlier.
Yeah.
So when a person takes an assessment, Michael, for example, we're just finishing up our planning. We do purposeful planning in the end and beginning of the year. And we had hundreds of people take this power planning quiz, and it's just 10 questions. Where are they on the planning process? And then I asked 3 questions at the end, and the one question is, so what did you discover from taking this power planning quiz? And 70% of the responses were, I'm lost.
Wow.
I have no idea what to do. I'm confused. This is, my lack of planning is the reason my business isn't working. Just this outpouring of authenticity and vulnerability. And so, we find purpose at this company by allowing that person to feel seen. So every single person, is somehow acknowledged, whether it's me personally or someone from my team, because I think it's a lonely road, this entrepreneurship thing.
Yeah.
And people are on a lot of lists, but they are invisible, not just feel invisible, they are invisible. So one of our principles here is that, our list and those who are engaging, right? They gotta click a link and do something. But those people who are engaged, they're seen by us and they're valued by us. That's how we find more.
So good. You are doing really cool things, and you're venturing into new territory, which I'm sure gives new challenges. So what's one challenge you're currently working to overcome in your own business?
In my own business with my own team?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, so at the beginning of the year, I have sort of like personal tensions that I'm working on throughout the year. But in the business space, it really right now, the challenge is leading not just a support team, but leading leaders. So I'm really good. I have the average length of stay with a team member for me is about 7 years.
Wow.
Right. So,
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Everywhere from 11 years to 4. So, so I'm really good at developing support teams, and I love to help people do that because it's what gives you the freedom. But my challenge this year, and what I'm asking myself to do, is really grow as a leader of leaders.
Wow.
And so, we're going to bring in a director of marketing for one of the companies, and that person, for the assessment company, that person will have an opportunity for equity share.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And I want that for them, but
because you want them to have ownership over what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, eventually I want them to own it, actually. So my 2020, the end of 2020, I want to have that company sold, and I want to nurture the person that gets that company.
Wow.
And so for me, it's me learning, like, how do I grow leaders? Who do I need to be as a leader to really have people like discover something within themselves that they've never discovered before?
Wow.
That's my biggest challenge, because I'm good at support team. I haven't had a great track record at being able to bring in someone and really nurture them all the way to the top.
Wow. Well, that might be a good question that's already been answered, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is the next big goal you have for the business?
So, oh God, this is so much fun. I love your question. Because I teach planning, actually in 1 hour, I'm going to take a group of people through what we call our planning palooza, where in 3 hours they'll create their plan.
Wow.
So because of that, I've been really entrenched in our own plan. So I don't do this lightly, but I have made the decision we're going to go to for the $1 million goal for one of our companies that we're relaunching. So we're actually relaunching the assessment company under a brand new brand with a new team, and we're we changed up the model so that we can offer the assessment tool for free.
Wow.
Which we've never really done before. We used to charge $1,500, but we reworked the entire software so that we can now offer it for free for 30 days. And so that's our big goal this year, is building this team. And actually, I will say another, I have a 21-year-old son, and we're bringing him into the business this year. So
wow.
Talk about a challenge, but he's awesome. He's studying entrepreneurship at LMU in LA. And so that whole thing of relaunching a business under a new brand with new, younger, the team is younger than I typically have. So that's the big goal. And that's scary. That's a big thing to bite off, but we're going to go for it.
That's so awesome. We'll be back with Jane Deuber, and we're going to go so much deeper into this topic. I think we're going to have some more fun with some topic. We're going to go deeper into the concept of thought leadership, revenue generation, messaging, so much more. So come back and join us with our conversation with Jane Deuber. In October, we are launching Idea Camps. The Jumblethink team is super excited about Idea Camps. Now, you may be wondering, what are Idea Camps? Well, these 3-day events will take you through a process of turning dreams and ideas into reality. I don't know if you're like me, but many people struggle with turning those dreams and ideas into reality. They have fear, obstacles, and just the unknown to wrestle with. Well, we want you to stop dreaming and start doing, to turn those dreams and ideas into reality. So head on over to jumblethink.com/ideacamps. That's jumblethink.com/ideacamps to learn more about how Idea Camps can help you start making those dreams and ideas become a reality. Today's episode is being sponsored by our friends over at Mighty Travels. Here's a little bit more about them. One of my favorite things to do is to travel. But often I am spending hours, maybe even days, looking through travel searches for the right airfare. Our friends over at Mighty Travels make it so much easier. You can go in, set your desired location when you want to go, and get notifications sent to you via email and text message so that you can grab those special deals when they're there. If you want to save money, up to even $190 per ticket, Mighty Travels is the place to check out. So swing on over to mightytravels.com/jumblethink to learn more about how you can access some great notifications to get the best fares for your trip. Again, that's mightytravels.com/jumblethink. Go on over, check them out, and start saving on your trips. Now let's jump back into the conversation we had with Jane Deuber. We are back with Jane Deuber, founder of Global Experts Accelerator. All right, before we get going, gotta know, how can we find and connect to your businesses and you, and find out more about what you're doing?
Thank you for asking. So here's what I would say. So Global Experts Accelerator is sort of that home base, so they can go to globalexpertsaccelerator.com. I would love to we're going to talk a little bit more about this assessment process and how people can use that and how it can serve them. So I'm going to say right now that one of the places that they can go and experience one of the assessments is rockyourbizquiz.com. So rockyourbizquiz.com. They could go there, experience the assessment, and literally in like 4 minutes, they'll find out where they're on track in their business. They'll also find some missing pieces. So that's something I love for people to experience it for themselves.
Very, very cool. We'll put that link in the episode notes so it's super easy for you to find it. I'm going to be taking that quiz as soon as we jump off this interview. I'm excited to check it out and see how I'm doing. So thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
All right. I want to start right off the bat talking about thought leadership in this segment, because it is by far one of the most topical things you hear about in entrepreneurship. And it's something we don't talk about that often on this podcast, although I don't know why. So first off, can you define how you view thought leadership and what a thought leader is?
Yeah, so a thought leader is someone who uses their experience and their expertise as the primary offer in a business. So whatever they've skills they've developed over time, any challenge that they've overcome, they've walked that path, and they then build the business around helping others do the same. So it can be as much as, an executive who's been running Fortune 500 companies now then becomes a thought leader in his space to help other CEOs, or it can be a mom who's figured out how to get their baby to sleep through the night and has a secret formula, and then she builds a business around that. So it's someone who has an expertise, experience. They build the business around helping someone else overcome the same challenges that they've overcome.
Well, one of the things I've heard said is that you can tell if somebody's a thought leader or not. If they call themselves a thought leader, then they're probably not. I don't know if that's true or not. But
and the other, I have a little issue with the conscious entrepreneur, because there's that line in Shakespeare, Michael, me think thou dost protest too much. So yeah, well, I will say, it's hard to find. Sometimes I use the phrase expert entrepreneur, but then someone thought that it was like that they're expert at being an entrepreneur. So it's a little funkiness in the industry, but for me, that's how we define it, and people seem to find their way to us, and that's what counts.
With thought leadership, it sounds like they're subject experts in a lot of ways, and that's what they're known for. How can somebody who doesn't have clout in a specific area, maybe they have a lot of experience in it, but they're not known as the speaker around it or the coach around it, but they've been in the trenches doing it, how can they make that transition of being a subject matter expert because they've done it and they have a lot of experience into it, to actually having influence in that space, into a message area where they can start sharing that message and become the thought leader from being the subject expert?
It's a great question. I love the fact that you've kind of, I'm putting my finger quotes around it, subject expert, because being a subject expert does not a business make. Like that's not a business. And so, and a lot of times when people come to us, they're 3-4 years in and they still haven't hit their groove. They're not making the consistent income. And a lot of times it's because they didn't build a foundation. Wow. And that foundation comes from, actually impacting meaningful, lasting change in the lives of clients. Wow. And so that's, to me, where we always go back, okay, what is the evidence that you have that your unique process, that in each unique approach really impacts lasting change? for me, Michael, it's one of the, if we can get real about this industry and say like one of the things that really is frustrating me is, that idea of starting a business without actually having, the experience. So too many people try to go to the leveraged point too quickly. They try and create an e-learning platform and scale too quickly when you got to spend time in the trenches, arm in arm with a client, really, really understanding. And you've got to have those case studies of people who were here and then they went here. Because if you don't have that, that's what creates the clout.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I think the problem in the industry. There's two problems right now in the thought leader world. Number one, too many people hanging their shingle out and not really doing the work in the trenches and creating that meaningful, lasting change.
Yeah.
And just being impatient, right? The second challenge we have right now in the thought leader world is we've eroded the trust of consumers. Mm-hmm. Like those individuals on the other end of that email on our list, we've eroded the trust because too many people out there have sold programs and products that don't deliver on a promise.
Yeah.
And I, in our e-learning division, actually across all of the board, we're really helping people understand that when you make a promise on your sales page, when you make a promise at the end of that webinar, that's a sacred promise. And when you don't deliver on that, when you don't do everything you can, like learning curriculum design, like making sure your e-learning platform is spot on, like making sure that you've got your consulting and coaching on, that you've got those skills, that you are part of the problem, where it's why, opt-ins are down. It's why conversion is down, because, we've been in this, heyday for the last, I'd say 7 or so years of people saying, hey, it's easy. Take your expertise, get online, offer a program, charge a gazillion dollars for it. And then people seem to forget. They don't forget that that's when the game begins. When the person hands over their credit card and puts their trust in you, we've got to do a better job as an industry of delivering on the promise, or conversion will continue to plummet.
Yeah.
So
and that's something I can attest to, that I'm facing right now. I spent 10 years in the web dev space, owning an agency, building. We've helped companies launch that are now billion-dollar companies, and I'm having a hard time shifting from being a developer in an agency where we consult in that space and build out the applications, to being more of that thought leader that comes in and says, let me help you come up with the process. And I think some of that probably has to do with the lack of trust of the expert now who's selling a program or selling something like that. So if you're talking to someone like me who has spent 10 years doing this, who has worked with Fortune 100 companies the whole way down to mom and pop and doing this, but is having a problem making the pivot from being a doer to being a thought leader in an industry, what would you tell them to do to help make that process more smoothly?
Well, it's a great question. You have to, so if we've already checked off the first box, right, which is I have history and experience of impacting meaningful change, lasting change for my clients. So we've checked that off. Then we have to move to the next step, which is, okay, really understanding, how did I do that?
Yeah.
Right. I'll tell you a story, which was so fascinating for me. This was, in the beginning of our e-learning platform, we were starting to build online platforms for experts and authors in the space. I had an opportunity to work with Harvey McKay. Okay. Now he's the individual who wrote Swim with the Sharks. He was probably one of the top leaders during the Tom Hopkins era. All that, he taught sales, right? And when he came to me, he had a $100,000 program that people could be a part of, and he had a book for $24.95. There was nothing in between.
Yeah,
right?
It's a pretty big leap from one to the other.
Exactly. And so we were looking to fill in his product funnel by giving him something in the middle that was a medium price, that really walked people through the process of, okay, I go from I don't know how to sell, and he was working with people in the corporate world, but I'm a new sales guy in my company. I want to become the top in the company. How do I get there? And he had such a hard time, Michael. He just couldn't see how he did what he did.
Wow.
So what I did with him, which might be something that someone else could do here on the call, is I said to him, okay, Harvey, have you ever coached? Like, has any of your friends ever said, hey, Harvey, I'm going to send you one of my guys. We're having a hard time with him. I'm going to send him in. Can you fix this guy? Because he can't sell anything, right? Yeah. Can't sell his way out of a paper bag, I think is what the phrase was. And so I said to Harvey, okay, so we like to do like 5 to 6 week program module courses that can be delivered over 10 to 12 weeks. So we have like a formula that we feel is a really good model for e-learning. And so I said, Harvey, so let's imagine that you had about an hour, maximum an hour and a half with this young salesman, and he would come into your office and he would sit across the desk from you and you would mentor him for those 60 minutes or so.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of that, you would say, okay, Bob, whatever, here is your assignment for this week.
Yeah.
And you would send him off and he would do it. And then the next time he came back, you'd unpack what happened.
Yeah.
And then you'd give him his next. Okay, here's what you got to know now. And you'd send him off. And so I let him see that mentoring actually was the makings of an online course.
Yeah.
And we were able to pull out of him what the process is that a person needs to go through. So that sometimes helps people think that if they had those little bits of time over a period of time, but needed to give individuals steps to take in between, that's how we begin to pull out what a person's online program or what their expertise is, whether it's a mastermind, whether it's a coaching package, or whether it's an online program. You got to know how it is you impact the change that you impact.
All right. You mentioned a word there. For me, it's become a dirty word that I hate. And I'll explain why I hate it, and then you can tell me why I'm wrong. That's fine. It's funnel. And what I see so often is that these funnels, these sales processes have become about upsell and not about actually creating sustainable programs. Like for me, if I'm offering a program, that program should be good enough to get you to what your end goal is. I shouldn't have to upsell you to the next program and then the next program and then the next program unless there's like a specific reason, like, hey, this is intro to web design. Okay, now this is an extended course on detailed curriculum on web design versus web development. I could see that being legitimate, but so many of the programs that these thought leaders are putting out there are all about the upsell and all about the next product. And it feels like a lot of these programs are really empty and hollow and all about just getting you into their tribe so they can upsell you.
Right. I get it. I mean, I'm right there.
Okay. So I'm not crazy?
Yeah. No, you're not crazy. Yeah, but there is value to what I would call progression, because every individual, who's on this call, if you're the thought leader, there is a progression to your work.
Yeah.
And every student on this call, there's a progression to your growth, right? So we've got to understand what I would call the anatomy of growing into whatever it is you want to grow into. So on the content development side, Michael, here's what I will say. Every individual on this call, if you're an expert in relationship or health and wellness or business coaching, everybody has 3 levels of their content. There's the beginner level, right? There's the intermediate, and there's the advanced.
Yeah.
And I think the problem that a lot of people make is that when they go to create a program, they offer what they're most excited about, which is oftentimes intermediate content or advanced content. So oftentimes people are missing out on providing the simplest of levels, which is the beginner.
Yeah.
And what happens is when we start our people off middle ground and they don't have that foundation, whether it's health and wellness or business, or it doesn't matter. When we give them the intermediate content, they don't have the foundation, they can't be successful in the intermediate. So that's one of the problems. That's why I say, hey, if you are going to hang your shingle out as a consultant coach, an expert of some kind, you've got to really understand, how do you develop content? How do you create an experience that walks that person from where they are now to where they want to be?
Wow. Love that. Love that for sure. You have.
Can I speak to the upsell thing?
Yeah.
I did really address it because I went down, like, it was really more on the product development side. So we have to call everybody to have integrity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, as you're investing in programs and choosing events to attend or masterminds to join, you've really got to look at the moral base fiber of that individual and look to their practices. And if there's anything about their best practices, if you get any of that, yucky feeling in the gut, I say, like, run, Forrest, run, because there's that, I think it was Maya Angelou, is, when a person shows you who they are, believe them.
Yeah.
And so how they sell is going to be how they deliver.
Yeah.
And so, I have issues with that. I think it's why we also have the assessment, which we just a little bit on that. But what it does, when an individual has an assessment that they use in their sales process, like I mentioned that earlier one, rockyourbizquiz.com.
Mm-hmm.
The reason we have people take that, and even if they come in through a different lead magnet or see me on stage or something, we eventually try and get everybody on our list to try and go through that assessment, because what it does is tells us, are they beginning, intermediate, or advanced? And so if they're rocking it and advanced, I'm not going to give them beginner content. If they're beginner, I'm not going to give them the advanced. So we have a right as a quote unquote expert in our field to make sure that we're giving people what they need based on where they are in their path, and only making offers based on what they need.
Wow.
And that, I think, is what you're talking about, because people are making, like, I see these guys, the 7-figure launches.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that you offer one product to your whole list and that everybody who bought to get you your 7-figure launch, you can't tell me that product was appropriate for everybody. You just can't.
Yeah.
So it's our right to actually, we do that a lot. We say, hey, that's not right for you. We're not going to have you in that program because you got to go over here first. So that's why people need that beginning, intermediate, and advanced product or programs, so they can serve the list. Because as I think we alluded to this before we got on, most people, about 60 to 70% of the people on their list are actually in the beginner stage, but they're offering intermediate content.
Right.
So that's like, thank you for letting me get on my soapbox, because it's so important for us to really get this.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. As we kind of wrap up this segment, I want to make sure people, again, remember how to connect with you. So how can they do that?
So globalexpertsaccelerator.com is the mother company. So you can go there and kind of see what we're about. But I would also, so let's do this. Let's also say, that whole assessment process, they can go on to rockyourbizquiz.com. But if they want, like, if you're an expert and you're interested in actually using assessments, let's send them to smartbizquiz.com.
Okay.
So that's one of the companies, and you can actually, where the program we used to sell for $1,500, you can actually, for free, all we need to do is put in a name and an email, and you can go through our quiz builder, and you can pretty much, most people, depending on the niche, they can build an assessment, Michael, in like under 15 minutes and actually start to play with that process in their business.
All right. I've got to ask this question, even though we've kind of said, hey, we're moving towards the end of the segment. How can people use these assessments to actually rock their business?
Oh, like, I could totally geek out on this, but here's what I'll say is, if you think about, so there's a big talk out there about surveys, right? There's a book called Ask. It's all about surveys, and surveys are valuable, but I want everybody to understand surveys gather data, right? Which helps you understand. Assessments do something that surveys can't do. Assessments help individuals measure where they are on their path on a scale of 1 to 10. So what that does is, yes, it gives me the data, but then it also gives to the prospect, because surveys, they're saying the same thing they've always said. It's their own story. An assessment creates awareness where you can, in 4 minutes, walk away and go, wow, like, these areas I scored myself at the 10, I'm rocking these areas. Holy moly, there's these areas where I scored myself like 3, 4, 2. Well, no wonder. These are missing pieces. Yeah. So that's the beauty of assessments. So, I want every thought leader to have an assessment for their potential client, because it gives that individual the gift of awareness, and it tells them, okay, here's how I can serve, here's what they need, and we're just able to do a better job of serving our communities.
So good. We'll be right back with Jane Deuber and our rapid fire questions. Today's episode is being sponsored by our friends over at Floxy and Opportunity in China. Here's a little bit more about our friends over at opportunityinchina.com.
At the dawn of the 19th century, forward-thinking people moved to the commercial centers of Europe. Moving into the 20th century, America welcomed millions into the land of freedom and opportunity. It is now the 21st century. Many of the successes and fortunes of our generations will be made in China. To learn how you can seize opportunity in China, follow the Opportunity in China podcast. The Opportunity in China podcast is available anywhere podcasts are streamed. or you can visit our website at opportunityinchina.com.
We also want to thank our friends over at Floxy. Here is a little bit more about them. Floxy is doing some really, really cool stuff. Did you ever need a graphic designed, a website developed, or copywritten, but found that the designers and developers were too expensive and often took a long time to get your project completed? Well, Floxy is your answer. Floxy is your unlimited graphic design, web development, and copywriting team. Plans start at $349 per month with no hidden fees, month-to-month billing, and you can cancel at any time. So check them out for your next project and for the project after that at floxy.com. That's FLOCKSY.com. And let them know that Jumblethink sent you. Now let's return for rapid fire questions with our guest, Jane Deuber. We are back with Jane Deuber, founder of Global Experts Accelerator. We are doing rapid fire questions. Jane, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I'm going to preface this. Usually I give the rapid fire questions out, and I did in this case, but we are gearing up for season 3. And so we've changed them up at the end of season 2. So you don't have the most current ones. And I want everyone to know that, because these are going to be a little bit on the top of your toes here. So
there we go. Okay. I love it. More fun.
Number 1, as a child, what did you want to do, or what did you want to be when you grew up?
As a child, I wanted to be in a circus.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and we had 8 acres. I grew up on 8 acres in the country, and there was this tree that was down across this lagoon, and I used to practice my trapeze artist as a young kid.
That's so cool. I am going to give you a question that no one's ever gotten yet. This is a brand new question, literally brand new. As in, like, during this episode, I wrote it down as a new question to put into our rapid fire questions new.
Oh, juicy. Okay.
All right. So what is one big lie about entrepreneurship that you want to break and you think everyone should know is a big lie that they shouldn't believe?
That it's easy.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not.
No,
it's really not there. And I think people try and make it look really easy because they want to sell you their program or their product. But, if you think about it, anything worth having in your life is worth working for, a little blood, sweat, and tears. You can make it fun, you can make it meaningful, but you can't make it easy.
What is one tip you'd give someone with a big idea and dream and they don't know where to start?
First, get super, super clear. There's basically 3 things. Why? Why do you want to do this? Why is it important to you? So that's the first one. Why? Who do you feel most called to serve? That you really feel that you can make a difference? And then what? What is the thing that you're offering? And so, when we help people who are in pre-launch, it's the why, the who, and the what. Most important being the why, because you're going to be knocked to your knees. You're going to have to step outside your comfort zone. And you got to really have this big reason for doing it, or you'll be part of the statistics, that 80 to 90% that don't make it.
What is one change you'd like to see in this world?
I'll say in the thought leader world, just because I have a chance to be on my my soapbox.
Yeah.
I could say world peace overall or something like that. But in the thought leader world, it's for every single person who hangs their shingle out as an expert to really take on the challenge of growing themselves, creating a business, and making offers that really does impact that lasting change, so they are delivering on the promise that they're making, so that we can regain the trust of consumers and do the thing that we're here to do on Earth.
What do you want your legacy to be?
I want my legacy to be that I shifted the industry, that I called experts to a higher level of being, and that we, brought best practices of being in integrity, delivering value, that I really called that forward in the industry, for sure. Yeah.
And from there, what inspires you?
Meaningful change. What inspires me is when people come with this audacity to have a business, and to really have the courage to just go for it. I believe that the universe and God rewards boldness and courageous action. So when I see a person stand in that, no matter how scared they are, no matter how confused, overwhelmed they are, when I see them take courageous action with, integrity as one of the driving forces,
Mm-hmm.
God, I'm in. They have my heart.
Yes. Yes. What is one book you think every dreamer or entrepreneur should read, and why?
This was an interesting one. I think this is a great question because it's one, I think, from season 2. In my opinion, it isn't just one. I couldn't really
Okay.
pick one.
Yeah.
I will tell you that I think inner game is super important. I think, I believe business is 80% who you're being and 20% what you're doing. And so there are some great books out there that help you get beyond yourself. And I'm going to give you one title
Yeah.
of one that recently we've been using. It's called How Not to Feel Like Shit, or How to Stop Feeling Like Shit is the name of the book. Shocker. And I know we have an expletive in there. But what that does is identify 8 patterns that I see people, and I'm victim myself, that when we fall prey to these habits and patterns in our life, we cannot function at our very best. And so that's one of the current ones, but anything around inner game
Okay.
that helps you get over the fear, doubt, worry, overwhelm, disabilitating habits, all that stuff.
Is there a book called Inner Game?
No, but there should be.
You should write it.
The inner game of business. I will tell you, yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, it's a great point. We'll see.
Alrighty. So how do you define success?
We alluded to it a little bit, but for me, it's the degree that you're impacting change in the world that you play in. So meaningful, lasting change where people are coming to you with a desire and a need and a vision of getting somewhere else. And your success is, the degree to which you've helped people do that. And that's reflected in the bottom line.
What is one thing you wish you had known when you first started out?
I wish I'd known, no one ever pulled me aside. And when Mario and I started that first business, no one ever pulled me aside and said, hey, Jane, this is going to be a whole lot easier and a lot more fun if you make room for your life and yourself and self-care. Right? I just saw the goal and I went for it. And those first 13 years really, really worked hard and ended up almost losing my marriage.
Wow.
Lots of problems in health. And so every business that we've started since then, there's been 6 since then. We really, Mario and I, have put our personal life, our relationship, our personal health beyond and above the business for sure.
If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what do you think you'd be doing?
I'd be in a circus because that's what I wanted to do.
I love it. I hear there's an opening for a new circus because a long stay is gone.
I will tell you, one of my favorite clients, this was years ago, was in Israel.
Okay.
And she taught aerial art. So she taught the people who come over for Cirque du Soleil.
Wow.
So I did have a chance to kind of support her. It was really cool. She had a whole camp where she taught them before they came to the United States. So I have had a little taste of it.
That's pretty cool. And our final rapid fire question is, what is one dream you are still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
It's our 2021 dream that we're on track towards. But in 2021, after we accomplish the 220 vision, Mario and I want to live in a different country for a month, Europe, Southeast Asia. And I want to just travel and teach entrepreneurship. I want to carry the torch of entrepreneurship on a global scale, and we're going to live in a different country each month in 2021. And so shall it be. I'll end with that.
As we wrap up today's episode, we always like to leave our guests have a final thought. What's your final thought for our listeners today?
If you're in business already, or if you're wanting to have a business, my final thought for you is just to go for it. And, to just know that this experience of growing a business, just taking an idea and turning it into your livelihood, it's not for the faint of heart. And I am like you, every day I face the same challenges, fears, the doubts, the worries, the overwhelm. But I can tell you, living the life that I live now here in Pebble Beach, California with my husband and all the freedom, it's worth it. So just give yourself the best shot you can possibly make.
Jane, thanks so much for being on with us today, sharing your story. So many great insights into the world of entrepreneurship and thought leadership. It's been awesome.
My pleasure, Michael. You're a pleasure to do this with. Thank you for asking such great questions.
Once again, we want to thank today's guest, Jane Deuber, for taking time out to share her story of entrepreneurship and amazing tips along the way. You can find links to Jane and all she's doing in the episode notes. We also want to thank our friends over at Opportunity in China, Floxy, and Mighty Travels for taking time out and sharing their story. Make sure to check out what they're doing. You can find more about them and links to them in the episode notes. I want to encourage you, if you have a big idea and dream, it's time to step up and step into it. The world needs people who really are living their created purpose, that are choosing to step into the unknown, face their fears, and change the world around you. So today, as we wrap up today's episode, I want to encourage you, take a step, a big step, a small step, but any step. Move those dreams and ideas forward and change the world around you.
Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps. Vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.